The first image lingers too long to be comfortable. A plow driver pulls off to the shoulder of I-84, his engine idling. Snow still dusting down around him even. Though the calendar says July, he's staring at something. He's seen thousands of times before, tire tracks pressed into slush, yet this time they shouldn't exist. The highway had been clear all week, the summer sun heavy on the asphalt, the last storm months behind. Still, there they were, two perfect channels cut deep into a strip of pale, lingering snowpack that survived only in a shaded crease along the mountainside. The tracks didn't merge back onto the road. They simply ended, swallowed by a steep drop where the guardrail bent ever so slightly outward, as though forced years ago and never corrected. For a man whose job it was to notice the road's smallest flaws, he felt a chill creep up his arms. These impressions weren't new. They weren't fresh in the way Snow remembers a morning's drive or an evening skid. The edges had softened, the slush hardened, as though pressed into the earth and then preserved under seasons of shifting ice. They had surfaced only now, revealed by a pocket of melting snow and the odd angle of the sun. He shut off his engine and listened. Only wind, no traffic, the sound of emptiness that highways never truly allow. He climbed out, boots crunching, and traced the lines with his eyes. Twin tracks curved away from the safety of the lane toward the drop-off, too steady to be an accident born of panic. Whoever drove this path didn't swerve or brake. They went forward straight and deliberate as though guided by decision or unseen hand. At the end of the arc, the asphalt fractured, a faint scar where guardrail bolts had once strained against pressure. He leaned over and saw nothing but slope, scrub pine, talus rock, shadows layered deep enough to hide anything. It was the kind of discovery a man might laugh off, call in as routine maintenance and forget. Yet a memory clung, a case whispered among patrol officers and old locals. The story of a couple who had vanished along this stretch in 1997. Newlyweds. Youthful, faces printed on fading posters, still taped to bulletin boards in tiny towns along the corridor. The disappearance had never been solved, buried in archives and worn down into folklore. Rumors of hitchhikers, rest stop crimes, or a runaway fantasy, all floated over the years until silence won out. The driver, standing alone with the ghosts of parallel tire marks, felt an unease that had nothing to do with weather. 28 years separated him from that summer of disappearance, but the timing was too sharp to ignore. He radioed it in anyway, his voice clipped and careful. He described the anomaly, stressed that the tracks seemed old, preserved somehow. The dispatcher acknowledged it with a flat tone, almost rehearsed, as if this wasn't the first time such a call had been made from this stretch of highway. When he returned to his truck, he glanced one last time at the slope. The impression remained in his mind, the quiet suggestion that something long hidden had pushed itself back into the open. A set of tracks emerging in a season where no snow should have been, calling attention to a truth officials claimed had been settled decades before. As he drove away, the sound of the plow's blade scraping empty asphalt rang louder than it should have, and he couldn't shake the thought. Maybe the Newlyweds never left this road at all. In the summer of 1997, the couple was at the very beginning of their story. Photographs, now yellowing at the edges, show them leaning against the hood of a modest sedan, a hand-painted "Just Married" sign taped crookedly to the back window. They had been married in a small church, surrounded by wildflowers, and neighbors who whispered about their youth but smiled at their eagerness. He was 24, she only 22, both still carrying the brightness of people convinced the world would bend kindly to them. Their honeymoon plan was simple: drive westward, cross the mountains, and see the country mile by mile until the road itself became memory. The last concrete trace of them is painfully ordinary. A paper receipt from a gas station along I-84 shows the purchase of 2 sodas, a tank of unleaded, and a pack of sunflower seeds. The timestamp is clear. The clerk later remembered their laughter as they argued over directions, and then they were gone. That slip of paper has become almost talismanic for the families. Proof that the pair was real, that their optimism had been captured in ink before. History turned them into silhouettes. It is one of the last verified artifacts in the case. Family members recall how quickly the silence grew ominous. Days passed without phone calls. At first it was explained away as youthful spontaneity, the kind of freedom expected from a road trip. But when a full week went by without word, parents began making frantic calls to highway patrols, ranger stations, and small-town sheriffs strung like beads along the interstate. No one had seen the car. No one remembered the license plate. And yet strange fragments surfaced in the following weeks. Rumors of a vehicle parked at a rest stop, talk of a young couple seen arguing near a vending machine, whispers that the bride had been spotted alone on a bus headed north. Each account conflicted with the last, leaving the family with a collage of possibilities that never resolved into truth. The pain of those left behind was not dramatic but grinding. The bride's mother describes setting the dinner table every evening for an entire year with an extra plate, insisting it might be the night they returned. His brother recalls driving stretches of highway at dawn, headlights searching ditches and ravines until exhaustion blurred the road into one endless strip of gray. Their friends quietly learned to stop mentioning anniversaries and birthdays, as if the absence could be softened by silence, but it never was. What makes the disappearance so unsettling is its absolute ordinariness. They were not secretive people, not travelers with dangerous pasts or debts. They were school teachers' children, raised in towns where everyone knew everyone. Their greatest crime was trusting the road to carry them safely from one horizon to the next. And still, somewhere between the gas station receipt and the empty seat at the family table, they dissolved into nothing. As years hardened into decades, the case was filed under presumed dead. The official explanation leaned on the landscape itself. Perhaps they slid into a ravine. Perhaps they wandered from the car. Perhaps a stranger intercepted them on some forgotten exit ramp. Yet none of those theories ever aligned with the lack of wreckage, the absence of remains, the missing vehicle that should have turned up sooner or later. Time, instead of bringing answers, only widened the gulf. By the 20th anniversary, what remained was ritual. Families gathered on the shoulder of the interstate near mile marker 241, laying flowers against the guardrail, pressing photographs into the chain-link fence. Drivers who stopped to watch often mistook it for a roadside memorial to a car accident. Few realized it marked something worse, not a crash but an erasure. Two people gone without trace, as if the highway itself had swallowed them whole. The highway does not whisper. It roars. Even decades later, when the investigator takes that first long drive down I-84, the sensation is immediate, an endless current of asphalt stretched tight between jagged ridges, the hum of tires rising and falling like waves against stone. The road feels alive, not in the way of comfort, but in the way of something that has seen too much and refuses to tell. The mile markers slip past like muted clock hands, each one marking the passage of not just distance but years of unanswered questions. He stops first at a rest area said to be one of the couple's last likely exits. The parking lot is cracked now, sprigs of grass pushing through, but the skeletal outline of picnic tables and vending machines remains. Sitting on a bench, he imagines the couple pulling over here, the bride digging into her purse for coins, the groom stretching his legs while trucks howled past. The investigator listens carefully, attuned to what lingers, wind moaning in the steel of an abandoned payphone, the low hiss of traffic, the emptiness that fills spaces once occupied by laughter. He scribbles a note: rest stop, pier, stage set, audience gone. Further along, he pulls over near a section of guardrail that local patrolmen once flagged as problematic. The white metal bears subtle scars, old dents and repairs layered like palimpsest. Leaning over, he peers into the ravine below. Pine needles collect in heavy mats, and rocks the size of small cars vanish into shadow. It is easy to imagine a vehicle sliding unseen into that depth, but it is just as easy to see why nothing has ever been recovered. Snow drifts here, avalanches scar the slope, and rivers of meltwater carve new channels each spring. The terrain itself colludes with mystery, burying evidence as efficiently as any hand intent on concealment. The smell of hot tar mixes with sage carried on the wind. He notes the sensory detail, the tang of metal where bolts bite into railing, the way the road heat vibrates upward until vision blurs. A gust brings the faint odor of scorched rubber, not fresh, but embedded in the very fabric of the road. He remembers the snowplow driver's voice from the initial call. The way he had said, the track seemed preserved, not recent. Staring at the asphalt, the investigator begins to wonder whether the highway is less a route than a trap, recording traces only when it chooses to. Nightfall shifts the tone. Driving this corridor in darkness, headlights carve tunnels of white through otherwise impenetrable black. Each reflective sign blinks into existence too suddenly. Each mile of road feels doubled, endless. He tries to picture the couple's car here, Newlyweds, singing along to their cassette tape. The bride resting her forehead against cool glass, the groom tightening his grip on the wheel as fatigue set in. The road does not forgive fatigue. It coils and dips lined with drop-offs that offer no second chance. Yet what unsettles him most is not the danger, but the silence that follows once taillights vanish. This stretch feels designed for things to disappear. By dawn, the investigator has logged dozens of locations, rest stops, pullouts, unmarked service roads. Each bears its own anomaly, graffiti faded to illegibility, bolts missing from guardrails, scraps of fabric wedged into chain link. None of these details are definitive, yet together they create a mosaic of possibility. He notes that this is not a corridor untouched by incident. It is one with too many, most of them forgotten. Pulling into a diner near the state line, he sets down his notes and listens to truckers talking at the counter. One mentions the mile marker, where kids used to dare each other to stop at night. Another mutters about cars they never pulled from the ravine. The investigator realizes that the disappearance is not an isolated story. It is folded into the folklore of the road itself, a warning disguised as rumor. The couple's faces may have been plastered on missing posters, but the road had already written them into its own mythology. It surfaces not in a police archive or an evidence locker, but in the back room of a second-hand store off the interstate, tucked between moldy cookbooks and a stack of Reader's Digests. The ledger is a simple thing, a wide-ruled motel guest book with a brown vinyl cover, its corners curled, its spine broken by decades of being opened and shut. The pages smell faintly of mildew and cigarette smoke. Each line ruled for name, address, date of stay. Most entries are unremarkable, faded scrawls of traveling salesmen and family road trips. But then, buried halfway through July 1997, sits handwriting that sends a pulse through the investigation. Their names, signed together, as if checking in after a long day's drive. The letters are unmistakable, cross-referenced with wedding invitation saved by the bride's mother. The slant of the Y and the careful loop of the D match exactly. The date beside the entry is July 13th, 24 hours after the official disappearance. Timeline places them as missing. According to police reports, by then their car should have been off the road, their trail already cold. Yet here it is, evidence of a night spent at a roadside motel, hiding in plain sight for almost 3 decades. The investigator traces the entry with a finger, noticing the cramped writing of other guests on the same page. One lists a hometown 2 states away, another leaves only initials, but together they form a living document, an accidental alibi. If these guests were alive today, perhaps they might recall a young couple arriving late, still in wedding clothes stuffed into an overnight bag, perhaps laughing as they struggled with a vending machine, or asking about directions to the next town. The book does not speak, but it hints, suggesting the couple was alive and moving, not vanished into thin air. The motel itself is a ruin now. Its sign, once bright with neon, lies face down in the weeds. Windows gape with broken glass, and the office where guests once lined up for keys smells of dust and bat droppings. In the dim light, the ledger becomes more than just a list. It is a bridge to a night no one thought to check, an overlooked detail that collapses the neatness of the official record. Standing in the husk of the lobby, the investigator imagines them crossing the parking lot together, dragging a single suitcase, unaware that history would later erase this moment. The discovery forces uncomfortable questions. Why was the ledger never collected? Was it misplaced during the original investigation, or ignored because it contradicted an already tidy theory? The handwriting exists, undeniable, yet the file on the couple's disappearance insists they were last seen a day earlier. The simplest explanation is error, an overwhelmed officer, a misfiled note, but the darker possibility hangs heavier, deliberate omission, the pruning of evidence to fit a narrative easier to control. Later that night, in a small rented room with the ledger laid flat under a desk lamp, the investigator copies every name from that July week. They are leads now, faint trails to people who might still remember a chance encounter. Each stroke of ink feels like a quiet act of resistance, rebuilding a timeline that the official record has already abandoned. The motel ledger, once a forgotten relic, has become the first true fracture in the story the highway has carried for 28 years. He does not want to meet in daylight. The request comes through a friend of a friend, A voice on the phone lowered to a near whisper. A retired trucker who says he remembers something from that stretch of I-84, but doesn't want his name in print. The rendezvous is set for late evening in the corner booth of a highway diner, its neon sign flickering, its coffee burnt to a tar-black consistency. When the man finally arrives, he carries the weight of the road on his shoulders, creased skin, hands stained by decades of diesel and steering wheels, eyes darting toward the window before settling on the investigator. He orders nothing but water and even then doesn't touch it. After a long silence, he begins to talk. His story fixes on a single night in the summer of 1997. He was hauling produce eastbound, pushing through fatigue when he noticed something strange. A sedan pulled to the shoulder near a snow fence, hazard lights blinking weakly against the dark. He slowed, instinct tugging at him to stop, but another detail caught his attention. Behind the stranded car was a second vehicle, parked too close, headlights still burning. It didn't look like a good Samaritan offering help. It looked like someone waiting. He leans forward as he speaks, voice roughened by years of cigarettes. He describes how the Newlyweds car, he swears it matched the description, the taped "just married" sign still hanging, sat angled toward the ditch as if nudged. He says he saw a figure standing beside the driver's door, and another form silhouetted by the lights of the second car. Something about the posture unsettled him. Stiff and confrontational, not the casual stance of people chatting roadside. He drove past, torn between stopping and the instinct to keep rolling. By the time he decided to circle back at the next exit, both cars were gone. The investigator presses him on why he never came forward. The man exhales heavily, staring at the untouched glass of water. Back then, he says, truckers were discouraged from getting involved in roadside incidents. Patrol officers had a reputation for dismissing reports unless they fit the case they already believed. He insists he mentioned it casually at a way station, but the reaction was a shrug, a warning to let the troopers handle it. After that, he stayed quiet. The years hardened his silence until it became habit, though the memory never left. His tone shifts as he describes what happened after he agreed to talk. A week earlier, he received a letter with no return address. Just a photocopied newspaper, clipping about the disappearance. The words "drop it" scrawled in red marker across the page. He burns the letter but keeps the image in his head, unnerved that someone still cares enough to warn him after nearly 3 decades. His eyes flick to the door again as if expecting someone to burst through. Before leaving, he delivers a final line that sits heavy in the air. "They didn't just vanish," he mutters. "Somebody made sure they were never found. And if you keep digging, they'll come looking for you, too." He slides out of the booth without another word, leaving the investigator with cold coffee, a trembling hand over his notebook, and the sinking awareness that the story is no longer just about what happened in 1997. It is about what someone, somewhere, still doesn't want uncovered. The official record insists on neatness. Every report, every press briefing, every anniversary summary repeats the same timeline. The couple was last seen on July 12, 1997, at a gas station along I-84. Nothing afterward. The case file moves forward from that certainty, treating July 13th as the day after their disappearance, the first day of silence. But the truth never stays neat when paper and ink are involved. Inside a county planning office, in a climate-controlled basement where maps and photographs of highway projects are stored, the investigator unrolls a heavy blueprint stamped with the date. July 13th, 1997. It documents a section of the I-84 expansion project near the same stretch where the couple's names appeared in the motel ledger. A series of black and white photographs clipped to the file show the foundation of a poured retaining wall. The photos are mundane: men in hard hats, rebar sticking out of fresh concrete, a clipboard held up for scale. But one small detail disrupts everything. In the corner of one frame, pressed faintly into wet concrete, is a date stamp, July 14th, 1997. At first glance, it seems like nothing, a contractor's routine practice of marking pours. But if the pour happened on the 14th, then the photographs documenting it cannot logically bear a county office stamp from the 13th. Someone adjusted a timeline, either moving events backward to cover a gap or creating paperwork to make sure no record of the 14th existed. The discrepancy is small, the kind only obsessive eyes notice, but in the context of a disappearance tied to those very days, it becomes explosive. The investigator overlays the motel ledger with the blueprint dates, pinning copies to a corkboard in his rented room. The pattern sharpens. The couple signs into a motel on July 13th. A county record, supposedly stamped the same day, contains visual evidence from July 14. Somewhere between these documents lies proof that the official narrative that the couple vanished into thin air on the 12th is false. Either the ledger is fabricated, unlikely, given the consistency of handwriting and ink aging, or the county altered its construction timeline. Both possibilities point toward suppression. In pursuit of more clarity, he requests access to inspection logs from that week. What comes back is even stranger. Several sheets are missing. Entire days from July 12 through 15 are absent from the binder, replaced by photocopies labeled "Not available." The clerk who hands over the binder shrugs, saying only that records from that period went missing years ago. She seems unsurprised, as though gaps in government archives are a fact of life, not a cause for alarm. But for an investigator following the trail of two vanished people, those gaps are like blank spaces in a confession. That night, under the sterile hum of fluorescent light, the investigator lays the motel ledger beside the stamped photographs, tracing his finger along the dates as if the numbers themselves hold secrets. He notices something else in the photographs. Beyond the concrete pour, a line of vehicles parked on the shoulder. One looks like a mid-sized sedan, its shape blurred, its license plate unreadable. Still, its presence feels deliberate, captured accidentally in a frame meant for construction documentation. The car sits at the edge of the frame, peripheral, almost ghost-like. The conclusion creeps in slowly but firmly. The official records are not simply incomplete, they are wrong.
Deliberately or carelessly, they have misaligned the calendar of that week,
erasing the space in which the newlyweds continued to move, breathe, and leave their names in guest books. It is no longer just a question of what happened to them. It is a question of who benefited from bending the record, and why those pages, the ones that could confirm their presence after July 12th, have been stripped away. It comes first as a press release, written in stiff language that feels drafted by lawyers rather than patrol officers. The state police announced that renewed speculation about the 97 disappearance is based on unverified documents and unverifiable witness accounts. They frame the resurfacing motel ledger as the product of rumor and urban myth, insisting that no credible evidence contradicts their original investigation. The tone is flat but unmistakably defensive. What was once a cold case, gathering dust on forgotten shelves, is now being actively guarded. Reporters who push the issue are met with canned statements. At a press conference, a spokesperson in a gray suit reads carefully from a prepared sheet. There is no evidence of foul play. There is no credible reason to revisit this case. To our knowledge, the couple left the highway of their own volition. The language shifts responsibility onto the victims themselves, implying they chose to vanish, that their families have clung to false hope. Behind the words, the investigator hears what is not said, a refusal to acknowledge the growing pile of contradictions. Privately, the pushback sharpens. A state patrol officer, off the record, warns a local journalist that digging into old files could lead to charges for tampering with state property. The motel ledger, though innocuous on its own, is painted as stolen material. The photographs of the construction site are dismissed as misfiled images, unrelated to the timeline. Every anomaly is recast as accident or fabrication. Each gap in the record is reframed as irrelevant. The official narrative doubles down on itself, a wall reinforced against intrusion. For the families, this resistance reopens wounds. The bride's mother watches the press, briefing on television, and throws a glass of water at the screen. "They're lying," she whispers to no one in particular, her voice breaking. To her, the evidence of her daughter's handwriting in the ledger is more real than anything spoken from behind a podium. Yet she knows how power works. Once the state declares something unworthy of pursuit, the burden shifts cruelly onto the victim's kin to prove otherwise. The investigator feels the pressure more directly. A visit to the county records office, That once seemed routine now ends with a staffer refusing entry. Requests for documents that were once freely available are suddenly pending review. Late at night, a car idles too long outside his rented motel room, its headlights washing the curtains in white for minutes before pulling away. No one says outright to stop, but the atmosphere thickens with suggestion. You are trespassing into spaces not meant for you. The contrast between artifact and authority grows sharper with each passing day. On one side, motel ledgers, stamped concrete photographs, whispered testimonies, all carrying the texture of authenticity. On the other, polished statements, missing files, a machinery of denial. The investigator begins to see the contours of something larger than a simple disappearance. The road itself, the agencies meant to protect it, the bureaucracies meant to archive its history. Together they form a system that prefers erasure to accountability. And yet the more resistance he encounters, the clearer the truth feels. If there were nothing to hide, why expend energy on dismissals, on press releases, on subtle intimidation? The official counter-narrative, rather than closing the case, only breathes new life into it. The contradiction is now undeniable. The state insists on absence, while the artifacts whisper presence. Somewhere between those poles lies the real story, and the weight of silence only confirms its gravity. It arrives in an unmarked cardboard box, the kind used to store decades of forgotten belongings. A relative of the groom cleaning out an attic after a move discovers it tucked behind winter coats and rusted holiday ornaments. Inside are ordinary objects, a cracked photo frame, a stack of postcards never sent, a pair of sunglasses with one lens missing. Buried at the bottom, wrapped in a faded t-shirt, lies a cassette tape in a brittle plastic case. On its spine, written in blue ballpoint, is a single year, 1997. The tape looks unremarkable, but when slid into an old deck and played, it becomes something else entirely. At first, it's nothing more than the couple's road trip soundtrack. Tinny music bleeding through, upbeat pop songs that once filled long miles with joy. The hiss of old magnetic tape accompanies every note. But the songs are intact, familiar. Then halfway through a track, the music cuts abruptly. There is a muffled laugh, the scrape of fabric, and a man's voice faintly audible under the hum of the car's engine. A woman answers, her tone playful but tired, as though they'd been driving all day. For a moment it feels like they are alive again, a fragment of time preserved in plastic. But what follows steals the air from the room. The tape doesn't stop when the music ends. The recording continues unintentionally, capturing ambient sounds, the drone of tires, the faint whoosh of wind against the car frame. Then slowly another noise emerges, a second set of tires approaching, louder, pressing close. The man's voice grows sharp, the laughter gone. He says something indistinct, hurried. The woman gasps, then a door creaks open. For several seconds there is only wind, then the heavy slam of a car door not belonging to theirs. The investigator rewinds again and again, straining to catch details. A distant engine idles, voices overlap, low and tense, one male voice unfamiliar and commanding. The bride's voice rises, sharper now, but muffled as though spoken from outside the vehicle. There is a scuffle of movement. Fabric brushing against a microphone, then a dull thud that cuts into static. After that, only silence. A magnetic hiss that stretches for minutes before the tape ends in emptiness. It is not proof, not in the way that photographs or signatures can be catalogued, but it carries the raw texture of truth. The cassette is too old to fake convincingly. Its wear consistent with decades of storage. The investigator sends it to an audio specialist, who confirms what instinct already knew. The recording is authentic, untouched, a byproduct of a car stereo set to record when no one realized it was running. The family listens once and refuses to hear it again. The bride's mother covers her ears halfway through, sobbing, unwilling to let those final moments echo in her mind. The groom's brother clenches his jaw, his face stone, but afterward admits he hears the sound of someone being forced away. To them, the cassette is both a gift and a wound, proof that their children did not vanish by choice, but also evidence of fear they never wished to imagine. For the investigator, the tape is more than memory. It is a disruption. Official records say the couple was last seen at a gas station. The motel ledger suggests they were alive after. The tape proves they were not only alive but in danger, interacting with someone who was never supposed to be part of their story. It is an artifact that doesn't merely contradict the official timeline, it destroys it. Late at night, With the cassette sitting on the desk like a black box salvaged from a disaster, the investigator feels the case shift. This is no longer folklore. No longer rumor of two young lovers swallowed by the road. This is a recording of intrusion, confrontation, and violence. Whatever force has tried to suppress the truth for 28 years has just lost control of the narrative. The tape speaks, and what it says is unmistakable. They did not disappear into nothing. Something or someone took them. The ravine does not reveal itself easily. From the highway, it looks like any other cut in the earth. Brush-choked, hidden behind guardrails and runoff drains. The kind of place most drivers pass without a second glance. But standing at its edge, the investigator feels the hush that clings to it. The kind of silence that comes not from peace but from neglect. For nearly 3 decades, no one has cut back the thorns or pulled the collapsed branches. Nature has reclaimed the slope, but not completely. Beneath the surface, something stubborn lingers. He descends carefully, boots sinking into loose soil that smells faintly metallic after a recent rain. The air grows cooler, damp as the slope curves downward. Broken bottles glitter among the rocks, remnants of roadside litter. But mixed within are older things, a bent hubcap, rusted metal tubing, shards of glass dulled to a milky frost. At first glance, it could all be trash, discarded over years of traffic. Yet the investigator's eye, trained now to notice anomaly, keeps circling back to one thing: the faint outline of tire tracks, pressed into hardened mud near the base. The tracks don't belong here. The slope is too steep, the ground too unstable for normal access. They appear preserved by chance, the sun baking the mud into a firm cast during a dry summer long ago. Their edges are faint but unmistakable, running parallel for a few feet before vanishing into the undergrowth. To the investigator, they echo the cassette's story, the sound of an engine pulling close, the scuffle, the sense of being forced off-road. He kneels and brushes away dead leaves, tracing the lines with his hand. July tire tracks, left behind in a place no car should ever have gone. Nearby, the soil shows another disturbance. Not fresh, but not entirely ancient either. A shallow depression, perhaps caused by erosion, perhaps by weight once pressing down on earth. He digs with a trowel, peeling back layers of damp dirt. Within minutes, he uncovers fragments. A strip of rubber no larger than a finger, cracked with age, its tread faintly visible. He bags it, knowing it may be meaningless, yet sensing it could belong to a blown tire or shredded edge. The sound of water trickles faintly in the distance, a narrow culvert channeling runoff beneath the highway. Following it, he finds something else, fabric. Wedged between rocks, the color faded to a pale gray. When lifted, it reveals itself as the remains of denim, too decayed to wear, the stitching barely intact. It could be coincidence, but denim was what the groom's brother recalled him wearing that summer. In 1997, he had left home in jeans and a white t-shirt. By late afternoon, the investigator stands surrounded by small, fragile pieces, tire ruts hardened into clay, a rubber fragment, a strip of denim, shards of glass glinting where the soil has shifted. None are definitive on their own, but together they weave a pattern, signs of a vehicle forced off the highway, signs of something violent enough to tear clothing, signs left behind in the one place officials never truly searched. He photographs everything, marking coordinates, careful to preserve chain of custody, even though the state has shown little interest in revisiting the case. He knows the moment he presents this evidence, it will either be dismissed as environmental debris or spark, the first real break in nearly 30 years. The risk is clear. To show the artifacts is to invite more pressure, more denial. To hold them in silence is to let the truth rot further in the ground. As the sun dips behind the guardrail, painting the ravine in long shadows, he looks back up at the roar of traffic above. Cars hurtle past, their drivers unaware of the hollow just below their wheels, a hollow that may have swallowed 2 lives and kept its secret for decades. Standing in that in-between, between highway and earth, noise and silence, the investigator feels the weight of the case settle deeper. The cassette gave voice to fear. The ravine now offers its echo in dirt and steel. Neither is complete, but together they whisper the same conclusion. The couple's story did not end on the open road. It ended here, buried in the margins the official search never touched. It begins as a ripple in local media. A short article appears in the county newspaper, little more than a filler piece. Independent researcher revisits. Cold case of missing newlyweds. The tone is cautious, even dismissive. but it sparks something. Within days, larger outlets pick it up, sensing the human interest angle, the tragedy of a young couple gone, the strange new details surfacing after nearly 3 decades. Soon the headline grows teeth. Cassette tape emerges in 1997, vanishing on I-84. The families are thrust back into the spotlight, their grief reopened for cameras. The bride's mother sits at her kitchen table for an interview, the tape recorder in front of her like an object of worship and horror. She cannot bring herself to play it for the reporters, but she describes the sound of her daughter's voice, the last time she will ever hear it alive. Across town, the groom's brother stands stiffly at a microphone outside a courthouse, demanding a reopening of the case. His voice cracks as he asks why the state ignored the motel ledger, the discrepancies in construction records, the new artifacts uncovered near the ravine. Public pressure mounts quickly. Talk radio callers debate the case with anger and fascination. Some insist the couple fell victim to a random act of roadside violence, a predator never caught. Others whisper about something larger, a cover-up tied to construction projects, or even law enforcement themselves. The theories spiral, but what unites them is outrage at the officials' unwillingness to revisit the evidence. For the first time in decades, the case feels alive in the public sphere. The authorities respond with more polished denial. Another press briefing is held, this time with a row of uniformed officers standing shoulder to shoulder. They emphasize chain of custody, claim the cassette has no verified provenance, dismiss the ravine findings as environmental, refuse unrelated to the case. They assure the press that every lead in 1997 was exhaustively pursued. The effect is hollow. The community hears not certainty but stonewalling, and suspicion grows deeper. In town halls, voices rise. Residents recall seeing patrol cars stationed near the ravine that summer, officers blocking access without explanation. A former highway worker claims equipment was redirected during the expansion project, though his memory is brushed off as faulty. The families attend these gatherings, their presence heavy with grief, their questions sharper than any journalists. Why were records missing from July 1997? Why was the motel ledger ignored? Why is the tape dismissed without analysis? Each unanswered question feeds a sense of betrayal. By the 3rd week of coverage, the story has crossed state lines. National outlets run features, framing the disappearance as part of a broader pattern of unsolved highway mysteries. Commentators question how many families were told to stop asking, how many timelines were adjusted in archives that no one double-checked. The missing newlyweds become a symbol. 2 ordinary people erased not just by violence but by the systems meant to account for them. For the investigator, the shift is disorienting. What began in quiet archives and forgotten boxes now unfolds under bright lights. Microphones shoved forward, every step scrutinized. The artifacts he collected, photographs, fragments, cassette, are suddenly objects of public debate rather than private discovery. He feels the weight of responsibility double. If he missteps, the case will collapse back into rumor. If he persists carefully, the momentum might force something unprecedented, accountability. But with publicity comes risk. Anonymous calls begin to reach the families at night, voices urging them to stop. Letters arrive at the investigator's motel, unsigned, warning that some history is meant to stay buried. What was once whispered, intimidation now plays out, alongside national coverage, the shadow behind the headlines. Still, the story has slipped beyond anyone's control. The couple's names, long relegated to dusty case files and fading photographs, are now spoken nightly on the news. The community has chosen a side, and for the first time, the silence of officials is not enough to contain the truth. The case is no longer just a private wound. It has become a public reckoning. It comes not from an archive or a state office, but from a place no one thought to look. A storage unit on the outskirts of town, its rent paid for years by automatic. Withdrawal until the owner of the account, an uncle of the groom, passed away. When the family clears it out, sifting through boxes of Christmas lights and forgotten tools, they stumble upon a metal footlocker sealed with a rusted padlock. The lock breaks easily under a hammer. Inside lies a stack of spiral-bound notebooks, their covers warped, the pages yellowed and damp at the edges. The handwriting on the first page matches the groom's from his high school yearbook inscription. At first, the journals seem ordinary. Sketches of road trip plans, gas station receipts taped in with masking tape, Scribbled notes about meals on the road. Then deeper into the stack the tone shifts. July 1997 entries are hurried, words slanting forward as though written on the move. One page describes the drive through Oregon, noting strange cars behind us, blue pickup, same one twice today. Another mentions a stop at the very gas station where they were last officially seen. Felt watched, she said the man in uniform stared too long. The most chilling entry comes on July 13th, the very day the motel ledger bore their names. The groom wrote in block capitals, jagged with pressure, "Room feels wrong. No key card, just a metal key. Clerk didn't ask for ID. Think we should leave early." In the margin, in different handwriting, the bride's, are 5 words written in haste. "If anything happens, Mom." The ink is smeared, as though she tried to close the notebook quickly. The investigator pores over the journals for hours, cataloging each detail. They don't just place the couple alive past the state's official cutoff. They record fear, suspicion, a creeping sense of pursuit. The journals transform them from faceless victims into active witnesses of their own unraveling. They knew they were being watched. They sensed danger closing in, and yet no official report ever mentioned these notes, despite the fact that law enforcement collected belongings from the couple's home in 1997. How then did these journals end up sealed in a family member's storage unit, untouched for nearly 30 years? Speculation burns through the community once the existence of the journals becomes known. Did someone within the family quietly safeguard them, fearing they'd vanish if handed to authorities? Did an investigator suppress them, storing them out of reach where no subpoena would look? The fact that they survived it all feels miraculous, a counterpoint to every missing record and doctored date in the official file. The families read them with trembling hands. The bride's mother lingers over the margin note, tracing her daughter's rushed handwriting with her fingertips, whispering aloud the unfinished sentence as though it might summon her back. The groom's brother fixates on the entries about being followed, muttering that they were right all along, that his sibling was not paranoid, not reckless but hunted. The journals validate decades of suspicion, confirming that the young couple sensed the trap closing even as the state insisted. Nothing was wrong. For the investigator, the journals are both revelation and burden. They extend the timeline past every official cutoff, drawing a map of fear through receipts, road notes, and scrawled warnings. They also implicate more than one force. The reference to a man in uniform suggests authority involved at some level, while the repeated sightings of the same pickup hint at surveillance or pursuit. The groom's steady, detail-oriented recording makes the narrative impossible to dismiss as embellishment. Late into the night, under a single desk lamp, the investigator copies key pages highlighting patterns. Each artifact so far, the motel ledger, the photographs, the cassette, the ravine debris, has been circumstantial on its own. The journals bind them together, creating a living continuity of fear. They close the gap between memory and evidence. They turn rumor into testimony written by the missing themselves, and they ask implicitly a devastating question. If the couple left behind such clear traces of danger, how could every official report ignore them? The warnings sharpen from whispers into something unmistakable. What began as anonymous calls and vague letters now arrives in forms meant to leave no doubt. One morning, the groom's brother finds a dead crow laid neatly on the hood of his truck. Wings spread, its eyes clouded. No note, no explanation, just a message delivered in silence. The same day, the bride's mother receives an envelope in her mailbox with nothing inside, but a single strip of motel stationery, blank except for a smeared fingerprint at the corner. She recognizes the logo instantly. It's the same cheap roadside motel chain where her daughter's name appeared in the ledger. The investigator, too, feels the circle tightening. Driving back to his motel after a long day of interviews, he notices the same sedan in his rearview mirror for miles, keeping pace no matter how he changes lanes. Later that night, someone slips a folded flyer under his door. On one side is a copy of the newspaper article about the cassette tape. On the other, scrawled in thick black marker, are 4 words, "You don't know enough." The police are of no help. When the family reports the crow, the officer shrugs, suggesting it could be kids playing pranks. The investigators' complaints about being followed are brushed off as paranoia. Instead of protection, the families receive more distance, more polite refusals, as though the authorities are watching carefully, but choosing to do nothing. The pattern is clear. Official channels will not intervene. Whatever is happening now, it will not be stopped by calling for help. Meanwhile, the press begins to sense the shift. Reporters who once covered the case as a human interest story now whisper among themselves about intimidation. One journalist, who tried to request more records from the Department of Transportation, admits that she received a call from an unknown number advising her to let the old stories rest. She laughs it off publicly, but privately tells the investigator she is considering stepping back. The fear is contagious. In the family's homes, anxiety takes root. Locks are checked twice, curtains drawn even in daylight. The bride's mother starts keeping a baseball bat by the door. The groom's brother, restless and furious, buys a second-hand police scanner and sits up late listening to static, hoping to catch something, anything that might reveal who is shadowing them. Their grief is now coupled with vigilance, as though losing the couple once was not enough. Now they risk losing their own safety to the pursuit of truth. The investigator records everything. He photographs the crow, bags the motel stationery, logs the times he notices cars tailing him. He knows it might never convince authorities, but the act of preserving each detail feels like protection. If something happens to him, at least the record will exist. He begins carrying copies of key evidence on his person, hiding backups in separate locations. It is no longer just about proving what happened in 1997. It is about surviving long enough to present the proof. What chills him most is not the intimidation itself, but its implication. If someone is willing to reach into the present, 28 years later, to frighten those asking questions, then whatever happened back then still matters deeply to someone with power. The journals, the cassette, the ravine, the records, they have shaken loose something that was never meant to resurface. The threats are confirmation in their own way. Confirmation that the couple's disappearance was not random. Confirmation that there are hands still invested in burying the truth. The silence of the missing is now replaced by another silence, the one that follows when people are warned into submission. The choice is clear: retreat and let the story fade again, or continue and risk becoming part of its unfinished ending. The families, trembling but resolute, make their decision quietly in their kitchens and living rooms. They will not retreat. And the investigator, despite the fear that stalks him at every turn, knows the same. The breakthrough does not come from a grand revelation in court or a confession on tape. It comes from a place designed to be invisible, a maintenance vault buried beneath the highway itself. During a routine inspection, a retired Department of Transportation worker, now well into his 70s, contacts the investigator quietly. He remembers something odd from the summer of 97, an instruction from supervisors to seal off an auxiliary culvert. Access before it was fully cataloged. No explanation was ever given, but he recalls the haste. The way the job was rushed outside standard protocol. For nearly 3 decades it has gnawed at him. Now with the case in headlines again, he finally speaks. The investigator follows him to the site. A patch of stamped concrete lies beside the shoulder of I-84, its texture slightly off from the sections around it, as though poured at a different time. The retiree explains that behind it should have been nothing more than a stormwater vault, an empty concrete chamber for drainage. Yet in 1997, workers were ordered to wall it off. The memory is vivid, the rush, the presence of men in unmarked vehicles watching the job, the supervisor who refused to answer questions. We didn't ask, the man admits, because we were told not to. With the retiree's guidance, the investigator arranges for a discreet ground-penetrating scan. The results show an anomaly, a hollow space where solid concrete should be, air sealed in a chamber that by rights should not exist. It is too precise, too defined to be natural erosion. Something was built, then buried. The realization tightens like a fist in the stomach. If the couple vanished near this stretch, if the cassette captured the sounds of confrontation, if the ravine showed signs of forced passage, then this vault may be the end of their story. The work of opening it must be done in secrecy. No official channel can be trusted, not with the threats escalating and the state clinging to denial. A small crew gathers at night: the investigator, the retiree, the groom's brother, and 2 volunteers from the community who have followed the case obsessively since the newspaper coverage reignited it. Floodlights are rigged discreetly, tools lowered into place. The first strikes of the drill echo like gunshots. against the quiet expanse of the highway above. Hours pass. Dust clouds the air, the scent of concrete sharp. Then with a final crack, a slab gives way, revealing a cavity behind it. The stale breath of trapped air rushes out, heavy with a metallic tang. Flashlights pierce the darkness. Inside, the chamber is larger than expected, roughly the size of a single-car garage. And within, scattered in eerie disarray, lie fragments of what was never meant to be found. A rusted vehicle frame, its metal corroded but unmistakable, rests at the center. The roof is caved in, the windows shattered, but the outline suggests a mid-sized sedan from the late 90s. The same model the couple had been driving when they vanished. The tires are long since rotted, rubber sagging from the rims. Around it, debris litters the floor, scraps of upholstery, broken glass, the warped skeleton of a suitcase. A faded denim jacket lies crumpled in a corner, its stitching still faintly intact. The groom's brother breaks down, dropping to his knees as if struck. For him, there is no need for forensic confirmation. He recognizes the jacket instantly. He remembers it from a photograph taken on the very trip. His sibling leaning against the car in the sun, the jacket tied loosely around his waist. The investigator steadies him, but his own hands are trembling. This is not rumor. This is not speculation. This is the physical ending of two lives, entombed beneath the road while traffic thundered above for nearly 3 decades. Every artifact here contradicts the official record. The car proves the couple never drove away of their own accord. The sealed vault proves that someone chose concealment over discovery. The condition of the scene, hastily walled off, then forgotten, proves complicity at a level that no press release can excuse. The silence inside the chamber is suffocating. For a long moment, no one speaks, as though words might collapse the fragile air that has preserved this secret for so long. Then the investigator begins photographing methodically, aware that this discovery may never see the inside of an official evidence locker. It may be denied, suppressed, explained away as an abandoned vehicle, unrelated to the case, but the truth has been uncovered. The vault has given up its dead, and yet as the group emerges into the cold night air, there is no triumph, only gravity. The families now have proof, but proof is dangerous. The secret they have unearthed is not only a burial, but a crime sealed into the very infrastructure of the state. To expose it is to confront those who ordered the concrete poured, those who ensured silence stretched for decades. The vault has given answers, but in doing so, it has opened a door to consequences, far larger than anyone standing at the roadside can yet imagine. The discovery does not stay secret for long. Even with their best efforts to work discreetly, the presence of floodlights and heavy tools near the highway draws attention. Within days, word leaks. First, it's a murmur on community message. Boards, claims of a car found beneath the road. Then local TV vans roll up, cameras pointed at the cordoned-off site. They're reporters hungry for something bigger than rumor. By the end of the week, the vault is national news. Headlines shift from cautious curiosity to outright accusation. Were newlyweds buried beneath I-84? The families are swept into the storm. They stand before microphones, trembling but resolute, holding up photographs of the car, the denim jacket, the scattered belongings. Their voices crack as they tell the nation what they've always known, that their children did not run away, did not vanish into thin air, but were hidden. The mother grips her daughter's yearbook, reading aloud from an inscription about forever, friends. Her grief is no longer private. It reverberates across living rooms and kitchen tables far from Oregon. The state cannot ignore it. Officials convene a press conference. The governor flanked by law enforcement and transportation executives. Their faces are taut, the language carefully measured. They acknowledge an incident of interest, but warn against drawing conclusions. They speak of independent reviews and ongoing evaluations. The words are, bureaucratic armor, designed to buy time, but the public hears evasion. The question spreads like fire. Who ordered the vault sealed and why? Community outrage surges. Town halls overflow with residents demanding accountability. Former highway workers come forward, some anonymously, describing irregular orders from 1997. Jobs halted, records altered, instructions given by men they didn't recognize. Truck drivers recall being detoured that summer, forced onto alternate routes without explanation. A retired sheriff, his voice shaking, admits he was told, for your own good, stay away. when he tried to access the ravine after the disappearance. Each testimony builds a picture not of neglect but of orchestration. The press digs deeper, tracing contracts and construction logs, discovering that the project that summer was managed under a special budget line item with unusually restricted oversight. Questions of money and influence bleed into the narrative. Was the vault concealment an accident of corruption, or an intentional burial of evidence? The line between conspiracy theory and plausible suspicion blurs as more details surface, none of them aligning with the state's insistence on innocence. The hearings begin under fluorescent lights in a county chamber. The families sitting in the front row clutching tissues and photographs. Officials are called to testify, their statements laced with careful denials. Yet under questioning, cracks appear. One transportation supervisor admits the false documentation is missing from archives. Another concedes he signed off on a pour he never personally inspected. Each revelation is small but damning, confirming patterns of negligence at best, collusion at worst. The investigator sits quietly in the back, watching as the story he pieced together in solitude now explodes into the public sphere. There is satisfaction, yes, but also unease. The spotlight is fickle. He knows the state may weather this storm by sacrificing scapegoats while the deeper machinery stays hidden. Still, there is progress. The families are no longer dismissed as grieving obsessives. The community no longer whispers but demands. The couple's names are etched into a broader reckoning about trust, power, and the lengths institutions will go to preserve themselves. And yet even amid outrage, an undertone of fear remains. Protesters gather outside hearings with signs reading, "What else is buried?" Anonymous callers warn local radio hosts to stop stirring. Ghosts, the discovery, has given closure of a kind, but it has also torn open a wound in the collective psyche. If two ordinary newlyweds could be entombed beneath the very road thousands drive every day, what faith remains in the structures meant to protect? By the close of the hearings, nothing is resolved. Committees promise further review. Families are thanked for their courage. Officials retreat behind sealed doors. The cameras move on, but the community does not forget. The vault has shifted from secret to spectacle, from hidden chamber to public scandal. The story is no longer just about the couple. It is about everyone forced to live under a system that chose silence over truth. The hearings end not with justice, but with exhaustion. The families, drained from weeks of cameras and testimonies, retreat into quiet spaces to grieve on their own terms. The investigator visits them one by one, not as a journalist now, but as a witness, someone who has walked alongside their suffering, long enough to earn a seat at their kitchen tables. In these smaller rooms, away from the noise, the enormity of what was uncovered sinks in. Their children are gone. The truth is partial. But at last there is something tangible to hold on to. A memorial is organized at the edge of the ravine where the car first slid. The community gathers in silence as the names of the couple are spoken aloud, etched into a plaque installed on a rough-hewn stone. Candles flicker in the dusk, their flames reflected in tear-streaked faces. A pastor reads from a worn Bible, his voice unsteady as he speaks of loss and endurance. Some come forward with photographs, others with flowers, and a few with nothing but the weight of years spent wondering. The groom's brother reads a letter he once wrote but never sent, describing how he imagined their lives might have unfolded. A small house, children laughing in the yard, birthdays missed but never forgotten. His voice cracks, and in that moment the crowd seems to bow with him, as though carrying his grief together. For the investigator, the memorial is a turning point. He stands at the back, recording nothing, holding no notebook. For once, he allows himself to feel instead of document. He watches the family's embrace, sees strangers extend hands, and realizes that the case has transcended investigation. It has become a story of collective memory, one that will live on not in archives or hearings, but in the rituals of mourning and remembrance. The truth may never be complete, but the act of standing together at the ravine is its own kind of justice. Yet the undercurrent of unease lingers. As the candles burn low, whispers spread among attendees about the vault, about whether other sealed chambers line the interstate. A woman from the next county asks aloud, "If this could happen here, what's hidden under our roads?" No one answers, but the silence speaks volumes. Closure is partial, fragile, shadowed by suspicion that the vault is not a singular crime, but a fragment of something larger. Later, in the stillness of night, the investigator drives past the memorial stone. The highway hums with passing trucks, headlights cutting through fog. He slows, glancing at the shoulder where the stamped concrete remains patched and uneven. In his mind, the vault becomes both tomb and monument, evidence of what was lost and what was hidden. He wonders if in 28 years more, someone else will pry open another chamber, uncover another story suppressed by those who benefit from silence. For now, though, the families have a place to lay flowers, a site where grief can settle. They no longer have to imagine endless highways stretching into nowhere. Their children's last journey has been marked, their names preserved. In the calm after the storm, the investigator understands that truth is rarely whole, justice rarely clean, but memory, when shared, when honored, can still resist erasure. The night after the memorial, the investigator returns to his office, a small space lined with boxes and files from years of unresolved cases. He intends to shelve the I-84 file, to let it rest, now that the families have at least a semblance of closure. Yet as he sorts through the photographs, from the vault and the transcripts of the hearings, a single detail gnaws at him. Among the stamped concrete records unearthed during the hearings, one entry was redacted, a line item listed simply as emergency reinforcement for a culvert 30 miles east, dated only weeks after the couple vanished. It was brushed off as standard maintenance, but the phrasing is identical to the paperwork that hid the chamber they had opened. He pulls the file closer, tracing the blacked-out lines with his finger. Cross-referencing the dates, he finds something stranger still. The emergency order was signed by the same supervisor who had admitted, under oath, to signing documents he never personally inspected. The official explanation had been thin, but with this second anomaly it fractures completely. Was the couple's vault an isolated concealment, or part of a pattern repeated across the interstate system? The thought is chilling. He recalls the community member at the memorial whispering, "What else is buried?" Now the question is no longer rhetorical. The file suggests at least one more site, maybe more. He flips through his notes, sees other scattered reports from the late 1990s. Detours, rushed pours, quiet directives to stay clear. Alone in the dim light, he realizes the case might not have ended with the Newlyweds. It may have only opened the first door. At his desk, he unfolds the denim jacket retrieved from the vault. Its fabric stiff and faded. In the pocket overlooked in the first sweep, he discovers a slip of paper nearly dissolved by time. The ink is faint, but a single word remains legible, smudged yet unmistakable: Pendleton, a town east of where the couple vanished, near the redacted culvert entry. He feels his pulse quicken. Was this a fragment of their travel plans? A desperate note? Or a marker of where another chamber lies sealed beneath the road? He sits back, staring at the word as trucks thunder past his office window on the interstate. The families have closure. The public has scandal, but he cannot walk away. The vault has spoken once, and now it hints at more. He files the word carefully, knowing that if he speaks of it too soon, it will be dismissed as obsession or conspiracy. But he also knows that the story is not finished. Outside, the highway stretches endlessly into the dark, its surface smooth, its secrets buried deep. For most drivers, it is nothing more than asphalt and lines. For him, it has become a graveyard. Each mile a possibility, each culvert a question. The investigation has ended in one sense, yet in another it has only just begun. Somewhere down that road beneath concrete and silence lies the next secret waiting to be unearthed.